Namaste, everyone. My name is Reena, co-founder at Brihat, and I'm extremely pleased to welcome and thank all of you for joining us today on this beautiful evening. We have two very eminent guests with us today who will unveil the journey of this important book, Aryaa, an anthology of Vedic women, a retelling, a reimagination of our past for the modern audience. This has been published by Indica, an organization that has pioneered, I think, what it meant to commit to Indic causes and narratives, and has made all our worldviews and paths very popular. Also a big partner and inspiration for us at Brihat. I know that the excitement to hear from both the curator, GV Shivakumar ji, and one of our own, Kavita Akka at Brihat, is palpable, but I have the privilege of giving them a very short intro to the audience here. So Shivakumar ji, or Shivu Avre as we call him, is an IT professional, not many people know, I think, and the curator of this anthology. I think we know him best as the one who gets all his intellectual high and all his Agni working up when he's providing civilizational perspectives on issues at the intersection of Indian life, tradition, society, modernity. He's a scholar in residence and consulting editor at Indic Academy, and also has curated several conferences for Indica. More on his journey with Kavita ji. And now on to Kavita Krishna Meegama, our very own director of production design at Brihat. She's the author of Maitreyi, one of the 10 stories in Arya, and she always identifies herself as an Ashravidya Gurukulam student, even now. She accepted our call to join Brihat, quitting her very, very successful full-time role at the Indian Embassy in Washington, D.C. And she taught Indian culture, language, and is still a very serious seeker and student of Vedanta. And studies so much at Brihat, I can't even begin to tell you guys. So a guide for all of us with just her presence and demeanor at Brihat. Over to you, Akka and Shivuji, to take us through the journey of Arya. Thank you.
Dhanyavad, Reena. Namaste, everybody, and swagatam to Shivakumar ji. How is it, Shivakumar ji, holding Arya in your hands? Can we see it?
Oh, wow. I've been doing it every day, a million times.
So it's a 2.5-year journey, right? Because I remember the call for writers came in 2020, October.
Yeah, in October 2020, we started the journey. We got all the drafts by maybe March, April. And after that, we've been laboring with it for, nearly 18 months, more than 18 months. Yeah, rather nearing 2 years.
Yes. So, but we'll start with your journey, because I think your journey is parallel and very relevant to Arya's journey. I remember in 2020, I think was it, in July, that you had contributed to Indic Today for the first time. And I was there with Indic Today at that time. I was working with them. And from there on, being a writer for Indic Today to being a contributor to Unsung Valor, the anthology, you can talk about it. And then being a curator for Arya, and now a scholar in residence. Can you just take us through your journey, and then the viewers will understand also how Arya happened?
Thanks, Kavita ji. I'll try to briefly summarize this journey. I started my first article on Indica Today somewhere in Jan 2020. So that's when I would say that I seriously began to write in English in particular, thanks to Dr. Yogini. So interestingly, I had my own blog, and I would I wrote a book review, and then once it got published, I got a little more bold, and I shared all my entire blog and requested Indica Today to pick anything that they deem fit.
This was on Mahabharata, right? If I remember.
Yeah, I had a lot of writing on Mahabharata, my lifetime passion. So there are two things that I deeply revere. One is Mahabharata. The other is River Saraswati. And we'll talk about it. I can never not talk about these two things, and especially River Saraswati.
Yes.
And so then Dr. Yogini picked an article on from my Mahabharata list on Draupadi and Bhishma, and the Kuru Sabha in the Sabha Parva. So then I felt that I can write exclusively on Mahabharata, and made that proposition. And for one full year, I kept on writing about Mahabharata, and thanks to Dr. Yogini, she published it. And that's how over the next year, I then became a consulting editor for Indica today. In the next subsequent year, 2021, we published a lot of cultural articles in Kannada, original articles.
Yes.
Very few translations, but a lot of original articles. So then I began to write both in English and in Kannada. And then somewhere down the lane, what also happened was I began to write on a formulation that I had in mind for a long time. And that was, I once read an essay written by A.K. Ramanujan on, is there an Indian way of thinking? So this is a very famous essay, both in Kannada and in English, published, and it is spoken about all over the world. But it left me dissatisfied because it doesn't really explain. It really calls out the difference, but between our thinking and the West, but it doesn't sufficiently characterize it. It has no grounding in Indian thought, Indian ontology. So then that disturbed me. So then I thought it is essential to bring out our own ontology, and I had been working on it, and that's not the crux of this discussion, so I'll cut a long story short. And I would say that I boiled down to Purushartha and Srishti Sthitalaya and its interrelationship. Then
You've talked about this in some conferences also.
Yes.
By Indica.
In fact, very early, as soon as I began to write on Mahabharata, I wrote about this also in one of the Indica conferences on sustainability.
Yes.
And then I began to develop it, and Dr. Yogini published my concept papers. So, this week also probably one was my 7th or 8th paper on this will get published.
So, Unsung Valor happened after this?
Unsung Valor happened in this due course of time. In between, Sai Swarupa had proposed Unsung Valor somewhere in March 2020 or something like that. So then in April we published it, and I wrote a story. And of course, Sai Swarupa being the veteran that she was able to really close on it much faster.
What was your story on?
My story was Ghatotkacha in that. And so that's when I got this idea that there are several anthologies possible. And by then Harigaru he published that Indica will publish a set of anthologies and called for anthology proposals. And I had this in mind for a very long time. I had been thinking about this. A particular in general, I would say that the narrative that in the Indian tradition, women are quite subdued. This is the narrative that has set in the modern world, which I've tried to constantly, clarify that in the tradition it is not so at all. Especially in the environment in which I grew up, women were very strong, and and that's how I saw always.
In my family too, yes.
For me to grow up and think that this is how the modern world thinks was quite shocking, actually.
Yes.
And in particular, I would say that the narrative of Sati Savitri being a subdued lady is totally in contradiction to actually how it is in tradition, where Savitri is brave and courageous and scholarly and independent and takes her own decisions, stands by it, takes the uncharted territory, goes to uncharted territory, carves her own niche, creates her own destinations and everything. And after all that, in the modern world, the narrative of Savitri, Sati Savitri as a subdued woman was stifled. It was
also with Sita, Sita, Draupadi, everybody.
Everybody, but in the case of Savitri, it is an extreme.
It became a phrase. Don't be like Sati Savitri.
Exactly. So, whereas in the environments that I have grown up, Savitri is always a very brave lady. So, due to which I have constantly spoken about this, for the past more than a decade, and I had kept my own collection of evidences of other instances. There is a 11th century lady in Karnataka on whom a stone inscription is there in a small village. The name of the lady is Savinirmudi. Her parents' names are also there in the inscription, and the image is that of a lady sitting on a seat reading a manuscript. By her side, there is a stool with full of manuscripts.
Wow.
And she is referred to as Sakala Shastra Parangate, or something like that. So which means that Sarva Shastra Parangate means
She is well versed in all
she's
Shastra.
well versed in all, maybe whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
But the point is that it's not even the royalty, it's the society that was celebrating. A society established inscription, which means the society saw value in her being scholarly. No, this is how our tradition was. Whatever else you want to criticize, at least the basic minimum thing is that we have to be faithful to evidence that exists. So that was there in my mind all the time, and I proposed this anthology that we'll begin with women, how our ancient sages have thought of women. So this can go on, and start from Vedic era, and it can reach 1900, and we'll be able to, in every 200, 300 years, we'll be able to present how they thought of women, how women were, and so on and so forth.
Was it easy to make that switch because you are still writing, and you wrote the short story for Unsung Valor? And a little bit about that, if you would explain, have you written before, or do you like writing short stories? And from being a writer or a fiction writer, then moving to being a curator, could you explain the difference of mindset that it involves? And I know it's a lot of responsibility, and you've been at it and with us for 2.5 years. So that shift, and you've spoken about the idea of Aryaa, how it germinated, but just that shift and what it entails bringing out an anthology.
Yeah, I think it's an important question. That selfishness of wanting to write, I had to keep by the side, and it was
So
not.
I have to do this, and I have to start curating.
but then it was not that difficult also, because I wanted this. This particular subject is so close to my heart, and I so much wanted this that the decision was not all that difficult. If my heart wasn't there in the way it was, probably that would have been a little more difficult. But not so in this case. I absolutely wanted Aryaa to come out.
And how many stories did you get for Aryaa? How many?
I think we got more than 40 stories for this.
How would you select as a curator? Isn't that hard? Like, saying no to
something? I think reading through every story was not easy.
Yes.
See, some stories unselected themselves. Some stories selected themselves. So then, selecting the others was difficult, because then you had 30 plus stories to select, and then a few stories from that. That was hard. But then various parameters we applied, in selecting. One was, what is the potential to show what the Indic women of substance? What is the substance that exists in the story? And to what extent that substance could be fleshed out? What is the potential? And what are those characters that should come out in the first volume? These two were strong parameters based on which.
How many volumes are you planning?
Well, I can't do this in my lifetime alone. That much I'm so clear. Because informally, I just selected some prominent women, not prominent, but people who should be in such a volume, and I have already 45. So, and if we do a proper research, it will be that in the first millennium itself, you will get nothing less than 100. And then in the second millennium, where evidence exists more, you will get even more. And from the tradition, from the epic era, from the classical Vedic era, so there, it's fascinating. If you read Mahabharata, some women will come and go in just 3 pages, but their characters are very strong. One may dismiss them as not historical, but the fact that our ancient sages, could they wrote about such women means that either in the imagination or in reality they existed. In
So
reality, they
Shivakumar ji,
exist.
sorry, yeah.
So that list will be long, and this has to be eventually a community project. Of course, I will continue to anchor this to the extent that it is possible, but it is way beyond me, and I'm
So
clear
the
that.
anchoring itself, if the viewers could know, because once you selected it,
Yeah.
so if you can take us through the process of what making of an anthology entails, being a curator, and also how was it different, because you were a writer for Sai Swarupa Garu, for that Unsung Valor. So there's a difference in how curators curate anthologies. So I thought I just had to write a story. I thought I was done once you selected it, but I realized you made us do a lot of things over the past 2 years. So maybe you could talk to us about that to the viewers.
One thing I have realized is that writing is 20% draft, 80% continuous evolution, and and you ask any writer, a writer who sustains is the one who enjoys the editing process. And editing is recreation almost most of the times. So it's, I think calling it editing as a very, technical terminology, it kind of hides the fact that how much of recreation happens actually. You write a sentence, then you rewrite that sentence, you again rewrite that sentence, then you forget about it, then you come back to it, then you once again imagine it, and so on and so forth. That is not any less than what a sculptor goes through. And that's a beautiful process. That's a creative process. Just looking at the sentence and, stopping at these three words and thinking that it's not sounding good and, reformulating, thinking various possibilities, you have to enjoy it. And if you think of that as a burden, then you cannot become a writer. And similarly, you get 10 stories, then you should be able to imagine various possibilities. Those 10 stories uniquely form a book. If 11th story exists, then it becomes a different book, because you have to think through the sequence, you have to think through the tone and tenor. Every story's tone and tenor has to be readjusted for the other story. It must flow like a single book, yet it must be a collection of different voices too. So if an anthology becomes a single voice, then also it doesn't do justice to every author and every story. So keeping every voice different, yet blending it, yet figuring out a unity. In this case, the unity did exist because the culture and the tradition and the civilization itself is offering you a unity of voice and a substance and philosophy and ontology. So that is Vyasa himself has done it. So, we don't have to struggle beyond a certain point.
But you made us go through workshops, and then you
Yes.
made us read everybody's story. You planned it
Yes.
out like every week. We had two authors, we had to read their stories, give feedback. None of us signed up for it because we're like, what? We just wrote our stories, we are done. Maybe one workshop, little bit of editing, but we had to do it multiple times. And
The only
what about,
thing I did was I did not lay out the complete process ahead of time.
which is fine. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying.
No, I joked, if I laid out the complete process ahead of time, it would have sounded too heavy.
Yes. Yes.
So that the fact that we kept on incrementally working on it,
Yes.
made it seem, it did not seem like that much of a burden.
Much of a
Only when you
burden,
look
yes.
back, you realize that you went through so much. At the same time, I must acknowledge that if I pose like I had the complete vision of entire process, that's also not true. So as we did, we encountered something and then we realized other possibilities and we kept on improving. That creative process,
Yes.
that is
What
what
about
made it easy. And yes, there is a, you had to edit, you had to re-edit, you had to, look at the other story, and then you have to look at whether from the epics we are bringing all substance. That was my main focus. See, the process, the technical process of editing and, workshop, that is one part of it. And I knew that, we have an ecosystem that we can leverage on. But the fundamental crux part of it is to be able to think through whether we have, brought out all dimensions of the character. I think if that exists, that is one part, and the willingness to go through the rigor, that is part of the workshop, being the willingness to subject ourselves to being questioned.
Yes.
Here
I'd like you to speak about the guidelines, please. Sorry. The guidelines, I thought very important that you gave us, so that the viewers understand that we were not reinterpreting the stories.
Yes, that's very important. So I think that is a key point that you reminded me. And, for us, we could do everything, but we did not want to, we wanted to recreate, reimagine without crossing the boundaries. It's not a thick boundary drawn by the tradition, but the tradition has put some markers, being able to connect the dots of those markers and then creating a boundary for ourselves so that our recreation, reimagination is within that boundary, but relevant for contemporary times. That is the guiding principle that we laid out. Thankfully, that everybody, all authors agreed.
Yes.
And so that was the fundamental.
Was it easy, that's why, to publish with Indica itself? Because I know Unsung Valor was published by outside publishers.
Not necessarily. I mean, like Indica, that is also an Indica book, end of the day. So, the thing is that this is the way all Indica anthologies will be. Unsung Valor also was, a reimagination, within the traditional boundary. Of course, in that case, the details are well laid out by, the Kurukshetra battles. Kurukshetra battles, the battles are very, 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 very detailed. You have to unselect from that, But not so with the kind of characters and the stories that we chose. Here, the reimagination angle was different from Unsung Valor.
Yes.
Here, for instance, Subhadra. So we picked Subhadra's experiences when, the Pandavas go to Himalayas. Now, that part is not greatly fleshed out in the Mahabharata, but it is possible to flesh it out by drawing various connections that also exist in Mahabharata, in the Vyasa Bharata, not in other versions. So that's a creative process. That's a different creative process as opposed to Unsung Valor, where the battles offer you a thicker boundary, but you draw in from various other elements in Mahabharata and make a richer story. It's a different reimagination. So this is a different every anthology that comes in the future will be a reimagination, and where the curators and the authors figure out the boundaries offered by the tradition.
What about Aryaa, the title, and the artwork? Because you came up with the title, and if you could explain a little bit about that.
I think this is, if you look at the tradition, Arya is high culture, and it means noble. And if you look at and Arya is the male and Arya is the female. And if you look at most languages, there is a tadbhava of the word Arya in some ways. Ayya in Kannada, Ayyar in
we also say
so on and so forth, and you will find it that across the nation, the word Arya has evolved into different forms according to their languages. So there is a cultural unity, civilizational unity, that comes with Arya. And of course, the word itself starts from Rigveda. And of course, the colonial era misinterpreted as a race, which is not the case. And now it is quite crystal clear that the word Arya referred to an aspect of the high culture in the Vedic era. And when it started, it only referred to few clans, and then it further evolved into, high culture, and as everybody accepted, it became the name associated with high culture in the country, and it has its reflection in every language. What better word we thought was, to
Wonderful.
present the Indic women of substance. And we had an internal discussion. We have a group of anthology makers in Indica, and when we discussed, this word was accepted. And when I presented this word to the authors also immediately accepted, whereas there were several other words for which there were some differences of opinion,
Yes. This was
meaningfully.
unanimous. Yes.
So so when this word originally came up, so even I felt that I think there will be a larger acceptance, and I also see that with readers too, there is an intuitive connect with this word, and
And the artwork is from
yeah,
somebody.
it is from Sindhu Kulkarni and Shrikanta HU. So I've made an acknowledgement, of their fantastic efforts. They they pursued with all kinds of insistences that I had, fussy insistences, I should say. Because we wanted to
Like
get
what?
right.
Like what?
Why should this, line be here? Why should this line not be there? Why should this line be more pronounced or less pronounced? And is this expression the right expression? Is this pose the right pose? Where should the, bow and arrow be, and so on and so forth. The color.
You talked about the age with us, saying that it's good she's younger, and you talked
Yeah,
about
she's young, because the point is, this is the Arya that is, all the women, in their young age would be this. One might have gone on and become Satyavati, another may have gone on and become Chitrangada, but they would all be this, and they all would have learned, like Savitri,
Yes.
they all would have learned, Shastras and Shastras, and that is how, if you look at many ancient women, you will very crystal clear see that in the high culture they would have been exposed to multiple
Yes.
classes.
Martial arts and learning all this.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that you can wherever that culture is remaining, you will still see that.
Yes. We see that with Kalaripayattu and all that. What about the motivation that made Indica, and you, I'm sure, were the person behind it, having all the authors fly into Ritambara retreat near Bengaluru for the release of the book? We were also pleasantly surprised. A few of us from Hyderabad, from Chennai, from Mumbai, then all of us met in Ritambara near Bengaluru. And you got all these famous personalities. Sai Swarupa Garu was there, Yogini Deshpande ji was there, Prakash ji, Belawadi ji released it online, and it was really wonderful to have Vijayalakshmi Akka, everybody. So, what was the motivation for you to? It could have been done online, or it could have been done in absentia. So, just wanted to understand the thinking behind it.
Yeah, for that I would say that the chief
Haryana.
absolutely Harigaru. That is like, I don't even want to claim an ounce of credit for that. It was absolutely Sri Harikiran Vadlamani, and he said that we must organize an event and celebrate it, and we said, let's all come together, we'll discuss, and let's chart out what next we must do. And I'm thankful that Sai Surupa, Vijayalakshmi Eka, and Dr. Yogini flew from Mumbai.
Yes.
And we had Abhinav speaking from Bangalore, and
Abhinavji, yes, he was
and,
also there. Yes.
Gaurav Tiwari joined
Raghav
from
Krishna.
Delhi, my Sutadhar application.
Yeah.
And Sri Prakash Padawadi, when I requested him, he joined from. He was traveling, and he said, he took time out, and I can never be enough thankful to Sri Padawadi.
Yes.
And they all were there, and somehow it really outstandingly worked out. And it's all 10 of us. I was very skeptical that whether we would be able to meet, and all 10 of us were there.
Yes.
So there is some divine
including
blessing.
Manjula ji from the US, who happened to be in Bangalore at the time.
And that was our luck.
Yes.
So many things worked out. I think somewhere everybody felt that is an important thing.
What are the next steps, Shivakumar ji? Like both for Indica, what are the other anthologies that are coming out from Indica, as also
multiple anthologies are coming out.
Yes.
I think very soon Avatan's G's Flight of Deities.
Yes.
After that, Aditi Banerjee, she is coming up with an anthology that is lesser known characters of Mahabharata, in which I also have written a story. So while all this was going on, I was writing.
So you are writing
that
still.
story.
So you are doing your fiction. I mean, it's probably historical fiction, but you are doing that.
I haven't written much fiction. I'm more a non-fiction guy. So even when I write about Mahabharata, my narrative has been a mix of fiction and non-fiction.
Okay.
With the
You stick to facts. You stick to facts more.
Tenor is non-fiction and analysis. That is what is the tenor.
Okay.
But yes, I have ventured into fiction also.
Yeah.
And after that, there is one on the on India's relationships with the Southeast Asia.
Yes.
There is one more that Dr. Yogini is working on a couple of anthologies where we are also there. One on Bal Gangadhar Tilak and so on. So we have, I think, 7-8 anthologies. The anthology is a very important, instrument.
Yes, I was about to ask you, like, why not separate books? Why anthologies? Yeah, please go ahead.
This way you are, you're bringing a lot of authors onto the stage, and each such author with this experience will be able to go on and create many more anthologies, many more books, engage with other authors. So it's a quiet revolution that it's possible through anthologies. Also, if you want to create, one book, see, our book may have taken 2.5 years. That's partially because of the COVID situation and so on and so forth. And otherwise it should not take so much time. And with many anthology makers, many more authors coming in, the amount of work that we can do in a small period of time is very high. I think it's a movement. An anthology series can be a movement, and I think that is required. It is possible to write one good piece, but it takes a lot more effort to write an entire book.
Yes, that's true.
So that way, I think it can become a very strong civilizational movement itself. So that way, I think anthology is extremely important, and Harikiran Garu has struck the right thing.
Absolutely. So with this anthology now being released, now it's released and it's all done. You have it in your hand, and now the marketing, promotions, all that starts. Reviews. Are you exhausted, tired? Because apart from this, as you mentioned, you have your job, you have your family. You're the scholar in residence. You're writing for Indic today. There's so much happening. So how do you look at? Is it a necessary evil, like people are saying nowadays? Because in olden days you just wrote or you made a film and that was that, but now you have to kind of push it. So is that exhausting? When you're saying creative process, where do you see the creativity in, let's say, promotions or marketing or publicizing things?
Promotion is about reaching the book to the audience. The word promotion kind of hides the objective associated with it, right? So I'm not looking at it as an activity. For me, it's an opportunity to connect with hundreds and thousands of people. if possible. Even the tense that we connect with, it's absolutely worthwhile. So this is not at all tiring.
You enjoyed.
A person like me, talking is not tiring.
Good. Wonderful. So tell us what you think about the future of Indic writing in India, apart from just Indica's anthologies and authors. But in general, what is your take on Indic writing, and if you feel that it should go in a certain direction or you foresee something?
Yeah, so I think this I will dwell upon a little bit at length, I would say,
Please.
if you have permission.
Please. Yeah.
I will put it this way, that in Indian languages, the Indic writing always existed. All my initial reading and writing was only in Kannada, and for me, there was only Indic writing. Even the modern narratives were constantly fighting with Indic narratives. So, due to which it was within a certain universe. Now, post 90s, there is a significant change. The Indian languages writing has, suddenly significantly diminished in some languages. In all languages, in various degree, it has diminished. And a significant English writing as it emerged, the initial influences were all not Indic. So after a period with, starting 1947, there's always been a gap between Indian writing in English and in Indian languages.
Yeah.
And even within the modern, universe, that gap has existed. That gap probably became more pronounced after 90s for various reasons which I'll not go into. But nevertheless, in the last 10-15 years, the Indic writing has come back, is coming back. It is in that process of coming back.
Is it in other languages also, or only in
In
English?
other languages, it is seeing ups and downs, and it has a very strange trajectory that itself is another discussion. What's happening with our writing in other languages, but and it's the subject that will take one full hour. But coming back to English, what's happening is that there are many challenges, both in fiction and in non-fiction. Firstly, for us to get our dhani in English is not easy.
Can you describe that a little bit? Because I know what you mean by that. You had sent us a long note at the beginning of our anthology writing. So, dhani in English.
So the tenor of writing in Indian languages is a seeking. The I part is always, the author stays very much behind. There is a sense of submission to the divine, which translates itself in certain sound throughout the novel. This you can see even in absolutely modern writing in Indian languages. This element will be there because the language has been shaped over millennia in that fashion. This is both the way the rhythm of the sentences are, and the way your narratives are built, and the choice of words also. Whereas in English, you don't even have that vocabulary with you, the Sanskrit and the local vocabularies. Plus, the rhythm is different, and you're used to different kind of expressions that you have learned from various sources. So, to get the Indian dhvani, the sound, the seeking, the submission, keeping yourselves behind, and being able to look at the realities, and you view it from the Indian lenses, is harder in English because you have to create that precedence, that tradition. It doesn't exist. So only a person who has been writing in Indian languages and then shifting to English will be able to appreciate this better. If somebody has been writing in English, it's not easy to appreciate this. So that's
or when you read I think when you read your mother tongue, in your mother tongue, you realize there is a huge gap. I know what you're saying. Yeah.
See, for example, in our languages, we will not say "I believe." You will never say that.
Yes.
That
The
phrase,
phrases, expressions. Yes.
in English, it will come naturally, and there is a reason for it. And I'm not going to the reason for it, but it has its civilizational roots elsewhere and conceptual roots elsewhere. So expressions are drawn from certain ontologies, certain philosophies, and so on and so forth. So,
do you want to briefly touch upon it, because you said it now? It's like ringing in my head. It's like a cliffhanger. People are going to wonder what it is. So, is it because I comes first in the others?
Many more. See, if I dwell into that, it will go off into one for that. So I'll have to bring the.
We'll meet again for that.
Aryaa for now. Okay. So the challenges are manifold. Right now, what we are doing, in summary, is to bend the language of English for a Purushartha conversation. First, what is the narrative? The struggle of being only in the Arthakama world, constantly striving towards, to undertake a sacred journey, and through dharma, not being able to, and the conflicts associated with it. That is our worldview. Now, to get this sound philosophy narrative without having the expression instruments in English is not easy. That is what everybody is striving to, both in fiction and in non-fiction. In non-fiction, you will somehow overcome. But in fiction, overcoming it is, difficult, and people like Sai Swarupa have done that.
Yes.
So, but the challenge exists. So, for Indic writing, the challenge is to bend English, for our pursuits. This, of course, we have other challenges, like, we have to bring forth our narratives, they have been distorted, so on and so forth, and all that. But in the midst of all this, being able to bend the language itself is another challenge, which some of us have, recognized, and many more people who are writing are yet to recognize. So apart from really bringing all our civilizational perspectives, histories into Indian language and make it accessible to future generations, it is also a language remaking exercise that we are, going through.
Beautifully put.
And you can see that, if you read the language of Raja Rao or, R.K. Narayan, and then see others' languages. Salman Rushdie's English will never reflect our reality.
Very true. So this brings me to your core interest. I know you have a model that you're working on. If you could talk about Srishti, Sthiti, Laya, and the Purushartha, and the model that you're working on. And you mentioned Saraswati, the river Saraswati. So if you can talk about.
Yeah. So the guiding principle behind most of my writing is that the central core of Indian life is the Purushartha formulation. And there is the fact that, we struggle with the Arthakama world, and we recognize the Supreme, and we recognize the possibility of taking sacred journey towards the Supreme. And it is the Dharma that balances these three. So this complex, really has shaped everything else in Bharatiya Parampara. And this has an ontological foundation in something more deeper, that is Srishti Sthiti Laya. And that is why all Puranas start with a Srishti section and Srishti Sthiti Layas and the relationship between them. They all formulate it differently, but there is a consistency, and there is a relationship with Purushartha. So based on this, I am trying to formulate some frameworks that can be applied in our lives.
Is
For
it going to take a
instance,
form of a book, or is it just a framework
right
for?
now I'm writing,
Okay.
and it will hopefully a book. I mean, definitely it should be. I want. I mean, if I say I don't have the aspiration of making it into a book, that's wrong. But right now I'm busy first writing. So around 7-8 papers have been written. All of them are available on Indica today, and the objective is to demonstrate what its power is in various aspects of our modern life. Okay. How is it possible? Can we reimagine institutions based on the Purushartha framework?
Yes.
Today's institutions, what does it mean? So that is the objective.
Wonderful.
How can we reformulate everything? Fundamentally, the motivation behind that was a community. If you look at what has been constant in India over the millennia, it is living life within a community. Communities can change, but community as a reality has existed. They may morph into different communities and evolve into different communities, but individuality and that isolated life has never existed until modern times.
True.
How can we, what is the philosophical base for this, foundation for this, and how can using that philosophical foundation, how can modern life be reimagined? So this is the overall objective.
You talked about isolated life, and that brings me to 2020. We all have our 2020 story because it was an isolated living for most of us. So I have heard it, and I think it's very fascinating what you did with your 2020. So I want the viewers to listen to it. And before I forget, please put in your questions in the chat box. After this answer, we'll take questions from the audience. Please go ahead, Shivakumarji.
Thank you, Kavita. I think I think I did not even realize how 2020 went off.
You were so busy writing.
Working on one side, writing on another side. If you ask me what was 2020, I don't even have the sense of time in that particular year. But there are some very memorable, events. One was, when the first paper on Srishti Sthiti Laya Purushartha was published, that conference, Indica conference on sustainability, that, in fact, mine was the first paper, and then I met Hari Kiran Garu. That was a very memorable day for me. I think that year I realized that, what is the potential of Indic Academy, and that the ecosystem of Indica and the fraternity, and of course meeting Raghav,
Raghav Garu of Brihat, founder Brihat. Yes.
Yeah. That year was beautiful.
So you gave some numbers, right?
People writing and meeting and talking, and it gave me the confidence that together we can do something.
So, Shivakumarji, I wanted the numbers. Sorry, I can't hear you. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. I wanted you gave us the numbers, right? You wrote, like, I don't know, 322, 300. I don't know. You mentioned some numbers last time.
I think 30 plus Mahabharata articles, some 5-6 papers, and I also, in the meanwhile, created a couple of courses on Mahabharata, some 4-5 lectures on the Srishti Sthiti Laya concept. So literally, I would say there was at least an article every week in that
Yes.
in that year, and one article in a week is what I could produce
with your job, with your IT job.
With your job. Beyond that, it is not possible.
Yes.
But that kind of a that was possible because I was waiting to do all of this, and with Indica fraternity, that exchange of information and wanting to write and all that it was it was like, for me, it was like a young kid who had discovered a game at which you are good at, and that was how it was.
So Akshay, do we have any questions from the audience?
More importantly, I want to request all the all people who are watching this session, kindly buy Aryaa, an anthology of Vedic women, 10 Vedic women, 10 stories written by 10 authors. The objective is it's written with the conviction that the values in our tradition and our civilization, they have some relevance for all times. That is the fundamental objective. Of course, to set right the narrative is a secondary objective. But the first thing is to, create a legacy of narratives that is accessible for our future generations, so that they have an access to good things. And of course, they have an access to the right versions of it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Akshay.
Yeah, we have one question. We have two questions in total. The first one is from Kamal Nab Mishra ji. He asks, do you miss leaving some stories too?
Lot of stories. Like I said, Savitri itself we could not cover for various reasons. And that is one story that I will definitely want to cover.
More anthologies are coming, so you can always include them.
Yeah. And Amba is another story I left out, because already a lot has been written, and we should come back and we should we'll come back to Amba at a later point in time. And see, the Draupadi, I don't regret so much, because already many people have and others, they have written completely, and it's now difficult to write anything substantially over and above that. And I regret not being able to cover lots of completely unknown characters from Mahabharata and Ramayana, who come and go in, like 3 pages or 4, maybe in one parva, one sub parva, in one half of the sub parva they come and go away. The one story, there is a sage Shandili, and she's an ascetic, and she just she teaches a lesson to Garuda. I've written a article on that. Like that, there are many, but you have to pick and choose 10. Obviously, I am eager to present the correct version of Savitri according to the tradition.
How do you say no sometimes, Shivakumarji? Because there'll be people, like you said, some were unselected themselves, but there'll be some writers who you'll know and they have written. And how do you make this choice of doing the best for the as a curator, as well as not losing friends? Because they would have assumed that, yeah, ye to mera to hoga isme, na? But he didn't select it. So did you come across such a situation, or you had to say no and it's very awkward? Like, how do you justify the role of being a curator as well as
I think
a relationship?
Not very difficult. If your parameters are clear, it's not very difficult. If you are in a position to explain, it's not difficult. If it is a very subjective decision, or you're not able to explain, parameters are not clear, then it is difficult. Otherwise, it's not. Leaving out stories is hard, I would say. Characters, like this question. Not having Savitri, I kept wondering,
Yes.
I should myself write, but then I desisted doing that. And like that, there were Shandili is another character. She's not well known, and I
haven't heard of her. Shandini. It's a
Lee.
Shandili. Okay.
So like that, there are several.
Okay. And what is the next question, Akshay?
The next one we have is from Rajini ji. She asks, tell us about your challenges while curating different styles of stories.
Very good.
Yeah. Yes. See, the style difference can come from see, there are authors who want to write straight, in one, the timeline doesn't change, the time is flowing. And then there are stories where there is a flashback, and then deciding that for this story, you must go back, do back and forth, and putting forth that view in front of the author and requesting that change, or the other way around, for this back and forth is not good, and it is better to have a single flow for this reason. So that is one part of the style, that is the substance part of it. The other is, there were stories where the organization of the text into subtext, etc., was not very important, but there are some it was important. So, trying to figure out a blend where some stories are stylized textually and some stories are not, and deciding what is the extent to which that stylization can be afforded, because you can't have some stories with where because organization of a text and a paragraph and the indentation, with some with poetry and some with not poetry, all of them must flow into a single book.
Yes.
So that deciding how much was a very difficult.
And where to put each story, that also I remember you had thought about it
So
so
there,
much.
I think for me, my Purushartha guidance existed. So I applied that lens and organized it into one flow. So that was easier for me because I had something ready in mind, and it made sense.
Do you want to explain that a bit to the audience?
I will briefly touch upon it because that should be an experiential
while
thing.
They read it. Okay.
And while they read it, and I should not lead too much into this.
So
but still, people will figure out, if you look at the Purushartha and then the, laying out of the characters, where is the complexity flowing from what to what? It's going to be evident.
Okay. And finally, wanted to check with you how you manage your time. Because you are doing so many things, and writing and curating and having a regular job, having a family. So for other writers out there, and also for us, but other writers out there, do you fix a time to write every day, or do you go with the sudden flow and inspiration? How does it work for you? That's the last question, I promise.
I will just bow at the feet of Saraswati.
Yes.
Or that inspiration that always exists, like I say, flows forever and eternal, like the Sanatana Dharma. It is the inspiration of Saraswati, and that there will be some exceptional years. You can't do it all the time. And there was a lot that I wanted to write at one particular point in time. So 2020, I thought, yes, I must do it. It's not possible to do it all the time. But I would say that beyond everything, keep the larger goal in mind. I think, if you keep yourselves a little behind and keep the goal in focus, I think somehow, things will happen. There are many articles that I wrote simply because of my conversations. So, somebody challenges me on something, we get into a long conversation that becomes a long WhatsApp conversation. And the WhatsApp conversation becomes an article, draft article, and then, that's it. So, in my own conversations with Raghava and Akshay, there have been some questions.
Legendary.
Immediately, I've taken it up and said, this is an important question. I think the key thing is that when somebody asks a good question, that's it. So I wrote a very, very tough paper, and I was very apprehensive, and sent it to Dr. Yogini. And she, within a couple of days, responded saying that, I'm happy you wrote this. So, when you get that response, then you have your energy for next 3 months. To be able to connect. I think it is more about, being in the satsang. I have come to appreciate the value of the word satsang. In younger days, you know how it'll get mocked at, but you will appreciate it. What is the importance of an ecosystem of thinking people, with the right synergies? Not that they have to constantly agree with you and praise you. The point is, even being tough but being in the right ecosystem, it makes all the difference. You flow along with others. You don't do anything all by yourselves. And if you know that, and if you learn to submit yourselves to the ecosystem, I think together we can do a lot. And that's why I said, I keep yourselves a little behind. I think it helps a lot.
Beautiful. Thank you for your wonderful insights, Shivakumarji. It was great having you with us and having this conversation. Appreciate all that you said, and sorry for my interruption. Sometimes I think there's a lag and I couldn't hear, so I must have interrupted you a few times. But hopefully the recording will be clear and we can hear all that you said. And thank you to the viewers and thank you to everybody. Dhanyavad, Namaskar, Shubhratri.
Namaste. Thank you, Kavita ji, for a conversation that I will cherish for a long time.
Dhanyavad.